We got TLC.
Hmm.
Is I'm curious to think about that band name.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes from the names of the members,
That's right.
T-Boz, Left Eye, and Chili. So
That's right.
it's a amalgamum right there. It works because the name of the band members and also a common term, tender loving care as well. So
Ooh, look at
it
that.
goes
There you
there.
go.
So
Well,
yeah, so
let me run the
yeah,
numbers
go
on it
ahead.
here. So we
Yep.
got ooh on the TLC tip coming in at number 1,803
Mm,
in the 1990s on best ever albums, number 184 in 1982, number 10,521 of all time. It is TLC's third highest rated album behind 1990's Fan Mail and 1990.
1999's fan mail,
I'm
I
sorry,
think. Yep. Mhm.
1999's Fan Mail. Thank you, John. And 1994's Crazy Sexy Cool. I believe we're covering. Are we
We're
covering
covering
both of
both of
those?
those. Yep.
Okay, well, there you go. Um, this did not make Rolling Stone's list, and TLC is ranked at number 1,251 of overall artist rankings on best ever albums.
And I am extremely familiar with those other two albums. So, I mean,
Okay.
very, very familiar. I also am very, very familiar with the three singles on this album, which were all of which I remember from MTV radio play. In this case, Baby, Baby, Baby was the first I can remember being a hit. And then What About Your Friends was sort of all over the place at that point, and then Ain't Too Proud to Beg was the third that infamously is the wrong word, but that's the one where they were full attitude, right, with Left Eye with the
Yeah.
condom on the left eye. That's where she's coming from
Well,
and
that's
stuff like
interesting
that.
because that was the first one that was released of the
Yeah,
three.
I don't know why I got to it in different ways and stuff,
Mm.
but like I vividly remember this image of TLC. And I vividly remember like when they came back with Crazy Sexy Cool, it was almost like they were a different band because they went from like oversized gear, sort of downplay. Like their lyrics were sexual, but they were dressed sort of like unisex in some ways, right? Like almost wearing like male clothes. And then on Crazy Sexy Cool, they were like leaning into being sexy. You know what I mean? So they kind of and
Right.
sonically, it was a very different feel. This album was very interesting in the sense that it was very long for an album of this
Yep.
genre. I don't think it had a clear idea of what it wanted to be. You had these three singles of various degrees. I always thought "Baby, Baby, Baby" is kind of generic. Of the TLC singles, I always have felt it's the weakest of all of them. I think the best song on this album is "What About Your Friends" by quite a bit. There's a raucousness to it that I like, and "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" is probably too long, but if you condense to a 4 minute song, I'd like it, and certainly more graphic sexually, I'd say, than most of what the next two albums would have. Of course, Red Light Special is the one exception to that on Crazy Sexy Cool, which is
Yeah.
certainly carnal, I'd say. But yeah, this was an uneven album. I got the feeling they're trying to make like a New Jack Swing album. So there were elements of what Belle Biv DeVoe was doing or Bobby Brown was doing. There were elements of what we haven't covered any of these artists and we're going to, Matt, but like what like Queen Latifah or MC Light or Yo Yo, right, we're doing, but
Mm-hmm.
it kind of what Left Eye was doing here, but I don't feel it rose to the level of what those female rappers were doing. I don't feel it rose to the level of the New Jack Swing we've been covering. um, I also don't feel like they totally have their sound yet. And some of that's just knowing what's coming later. You've got the deep voice, sort of sensual T-Boz lyrics, right? And then you've got Chili's got a more traditional singing voice, and then Left Eye's the rapper. And it feels like half of this album was left to Left Eye, and then the other half was sort of T-Boz and Chili combining on tracks. And I don't feel like they had it all together. You do see a little bit of what would be the magic later of the blending of T-Boz and Chili's voices because they go together really well. But I would say this was a little bit unfocused, maybe inconsistent thematically, and very much read like what a lot of people's debut albums are, where you see the ideas and the elements of it, but it comes together better in later albums. It's also a very interesting album production wise. Sometimes it's danceable. Sometimes I think they're almost going for like, you know, Bomb Squad type production. Sometimes they're going, Sex Jam R&B production. It just, there isn't a consistency to the production, which sometimes would be a good thing for me because it adds variety. But in this case, I do think, I keep saying it doesn't give it a focus a little bit. So I was not fully on the TLC tip on this album. I think it's an important album to cover though, because it does give me a little bit of the foundational knowledge of their whole album, as opposed to just, oh, they did a couple of these singles. And, you know, one of the things I lament a little bit is that we're not going to cover like Mariah Carey till like 4 albums in, right? Then we're going to cover like 4 of hers. And I do think we would have benefited from maybe listening to the earlier stuff to get a picture just to kind of do. And I'm glad we did this because it gives us, you know, what's the formative TLC before we get into their 2, you know, big albums. So, and of course, famously, they don't have a 4th album because Left Eye passes away before the 4th one. So, yep.
Well, they technically do, but that was TLC. Is actually technically
it's
they're still a
posthumous,
group,
isn't it?
No, they Chili and T-Boz are still going with.
No, I'm saying, but
TLC.
it's the 4th album with the 3 of them.
I just know that they have a total of
she passed away in
5 albums.
She passed away in 2002. Left Eye. So when was that 4th album?
So 3D is the 4th album released in 2002.
I think that's posthumous, if I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she's on the cover, so it must be. And then they had TLC was released in 2017.
That was the one with
the
just
5th
the 2.
album.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
which is still TLC, but I'm kind of going with the classic lineup, right?
Yeah. Well,
and
sure.
It's like, well, why did you stop covering them? It's like, well, they changed, right? You know, and kind of
Well, they actually the woman that started was not
Chili, right? She
Chili.
came later, yeah.
Chili came later, and they nicknamed her Chili because the C. They were like, well, we need somebody to be the C, like because the other one was Crystal, I think.
Yes.
So they're just like, okay, so Left Eye just named her Chili. Yeah, John, your take is very similar to mine. I think that one of the main things I walked away with is, well, that sounds like a debut album, in the good ways and the bad ways. I think that the 3 singles in particular, and I like Baby, Baby, Baby. I wouldn't say, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was more familiar with it, but I don't know.
I do like that actual and factual line.
Actual
and factual. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got, to me, it's a very solid song, and I think the one that stood out the most for me is kind of what you were saying, was "What About Your Friends." I remember the chorus to that. The verses is kind of what drew me in. That the T-Boz's lyrics on that. I think the verse is actually better than the chorus. I just think that was a cool, sultry, velvety kind of like, I don't know, there's like a little bit of a darker, more mysterious sound to that or whatever, but the verses are great in that. And the production's really solid behind it as well. I was brought back to MTV. I certainly remember the Ain't Too Proud to Beg video. That was, and yeah, they were very cartoonish, right? The big clothes and the condoms, and not just condoms, but they were also bright too, right? It was like bright green and yellow and pink condoms and stuff that they had all over their garb. There's a little bit of the immaturity thing there, but they were super young and they were they was a little bit goofy, but they also had a serious message behind it, right? They were very much, promoting safe sex, right? And that's certainly a theme on this record, and women's empowerment too. So that was a big thing too, that they're a lot of, his story in particular, or the skits in here, like Intermission 2, where like, what is it, like T-Boz like bitch slapping her boyfriend because he wouldn't take her to the studio, stuff like that.
What do you think of those intermissions? Did you?
It made me laugh. Well,
they added to the album because I know you famously don't love the skits. But
well, I'm okay with the skits. I just my thing with the skits were like, I don't know if they're needed, right? I'm fine with them. Like sometimes they make me laugh. Sometimes usually they're less than a minute long, so I can't get too offended by that. So, the intro, the first one's about it's a caller a supposed caller on a radio station is basically kind of putting them down, saying, yeah, I don't like their clothes and I don't really like them too. They're okay. They kind of look good, but whatever, so he's kind of very dismissive of the band. And so I think part of their message here is that they want to prove themselves, and they want to, show that they are empowered and that they are, individuals and that they're worth something as well. Right. But musically, musically, yeah, it's definitely too long. I think what's interesting for a lot of these songs, particularly the deep cuts, I think there's elements to each of them that have like, man, that's a really cool beat. I think they sample a ton of stuff on here, and a number of those things are I kind of like the samples, but at the same time, I'm not walking away with a ton of these other songs like hooking in my mind or like, repeating in my mind or singing it back to myself. It's really, kind of the singles that does that more for me. So
What's your favorite non-single on this album?
My favorite non-single, let me just look through here. I would probably say, maybe That's the Way We Like 'Em.
That's what I would pick too. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
I like the chorus to that.
So Marley Marl sample in there, in case you wonder. Yeah,
yeah, that right, and I recognize that from somewhere too. I don't know where, but yeah. So uneven, but still like when they hit pretty well. They're clear. They seem to be having fun on here, yet they also have a serious message going on. And I also learned, I did a little research on them. Apparently, they are the best selling American female group of all time.
Even more than the Supremes, huh?
And I didn't see like a list. I just saw that.
It doesn't surprise me. I would have put them in the top 5 for sure because like I knew they were huge.
Had a Destiny's Child, right?
Yeah, but I think it's because Destiny's Child didn't have as many albums, right? Because Beyonce broke off pretty quick. Yeah,
I don't remember how many.
Vogue, Dixie Chicks.
Dixie Chicks. Yeah, they sold a ton. Salt and Pepper probably sold a ton too.
Mm-hmm.
So they've sold a ton of records, and yes, you're right, John. I didn't really think of this. I should have, but the image certainly matured in their next album, right?
Oh,
it was like
sure.
more of a serious band or serious
like you
group.
could tell they were good-looking women in this album, but on the second album there was no denying they were good-looking women because they went more traditionally feminine. So, and
I always thought that Chili kind of was the third wheel here. Because certainly I just remember T-Boz, her vocals were more prominent. She took the lead, I think, more in the singing, and certainly Left Eye did the rapping. TLC, I don't remember singing any leads in the videos, at least, right? Like she seemed to kind of be a little bit in the background, and I don't know if that's fully representative, but that's just that's like kind of like the image I have in my head of watching their videos. And
well, it's a different structure. There's not like T-Boz isn't like a Diana Ross front woman. She sings the front, but then Chili kind of sings the bridges, and then they harmonize on the hooks. So they each kind of have their own function, if you notice. It's not like everybody's singing backup for just T-Boz. But yeah, she usually on the singing songs takes the verses, right? And then usually Chili comes in on the bridge.
Yeah, or the choruses or stuff. She's more prominent.
Well, they share the choruses, I feel like. Yeah, a lot of times.
Okay. Well, I do like Left Eye's. I like her nasally rapping voice that she's got going on there. It's like a very distinct kind of vocal styling. So I always like that as well. So yeah, it's kind of like a thumbs in the middle, type album for me. Hits pretty strong on some parts, and I wouldn't say that there's any song that's a complete dud that I'm like, oh, that's a bad song. It's just, it's a lot. It's too long, and it's mostly too long of overall average songs, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, I do find Ain't Too Proud to Beg hilarious because it's basically half horny, half trolling. You know what I mean? Along the way. So yeah. And
hey, she'll even take him flaccid. She doesn't care.
There's a solid winking with the eye that isn't covered by the condom, right? The right eye, I guess it would be, along with that song. So I liked kind of taking the agency back on the album, which I've always appreciated about TLC. For all the talk about other groups of girl power, TLC was hugely popular with the TLC run went from when I was like 11 to 21, right? Would have been around the time when they were huge because that last album, even though it's all of them, it's kind of cobbled together because Left Eye was always wanting to like leave the group at that point and doing solo albums. So it kind of wasn't there. So it was really around 2001 where they kind of moved to the next phase. But boy, between 11 and 21, there were not many women I knew who did not love TLC. And for that matter, there were not many men I knew who didn't like TLC. They really did. They hit the like feminism sexy lane, but also they always had a heft to them, I think, that
Yeah.
men, could appreciate them, but also knew that they meant business, kind of, which is a hard line to walk, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, and they were
Yeah,
huge.
and for only really having 3 main albums to be the best-selling female group artist of all time, that's pretty
But I
impressive.
process them as huge. I don't know
Yeah.
if you do or not. There's nothing about that surprises me
I
because
I
they
pro
were massive.
It's one of those things that does surprise me and doesn't surprise me because yes, they were certainly massive at the time, but I also remember them. They didn't have lasting power beyond after Left Eye died, right? So you're really looking at 3 albums over the course of, I guess it was close to 10 years, right? Because but at the same time, I'm just thinking, really, of all time, there's not another female group that sold more. Like, it wouldn't. If you had just asked me that in a vacuum, I don't think I would have come up. Oh, TLC's definitely on that list.
I would have put him in the top 5. I would have
Yeah.
guessed top 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only reason I wouldn't, like you said, the only reason I wouldn't have is because maybe not enough albums. But like if you said rank every female group's top 3 albums, I might have named TLC 1 or 2 because I knew how big these albums were, especially the next 2.
Next one, right.
Well, and Fan Mail was huge too.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear Fan Mail again because I
mean,
always remember Crazy, Sexy, Cool.
It's got 2 massive songs on it in No Scrubs and Unpretty, which were both.
Oh,
huge.
okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. All right. So we will more to come on the TLC tip in
correct.
future episodes. So.